For those who live in Navy Yard, did you know you can order Walters online for pickup? Visit waltersdc.com, click on menus, and then push the order online button so it's ready when you get there to take back home with you.
And welcome to Nats Chat. Hey, what's new? Anything new? I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. My usual co-host, the great Mark Zuckerman, Nats insider for MASNsports.com. He has recused himself from this installment of the podcast, understandably so, but I'm joined by the creator and executive producer of the Nats Chat podcast, Tim Shovers, and we are here with you for the oh-so-rare emergency installment of Nats Chat. The first episode of this podcast in 2026 ends up being an emergency installment of the podcast. The Washington Nationals are done with the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network, are done with MASN. The Nats on Wednesday morning announced the launch of Nationals.tv. Quote, beginning this season, local Washington Nationals games will be produced and distributed by Major League Baseball, making games available to in-market fans on cable and satellite television, as well as through the MLB direct-to-consumer streaming platform, end quote. So the Nats are leaving MASN and partnering with MLB for production and distribution of local telecasts of games. Now, while Nationals.tv is a streaming service, it will be available via some cable and satellite providers. So if you are not a cord cutter, Nationals.tv may well still be available to you. Quote, fans within the Nationals home television markets can watch Nationals.tv on cable and satellite television or stream live through Nationals.tv. Information on cable and satellite providers, including specific channel locations, will be announced at a later date, end quote. But this move by the Nats, absolutely a move towards streaming. This is a big deal on many levels. Tim, it is good to be with you. We thought that this day might be coming, and here it is. The Nats are done with MASN.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, right? I mean, the MASN saga has been such a big part of this organization since day one. And every team is on, various TV networks, but I don't know if so many teams were as intertwined with the background of their TV network like the Nats were. So this is definitely a new day, end of 20 years, believe it or not. And the future is here in terms of MLB's next chapter of how games are broadcast. And the Nats are added to a growing list of teams that are going this route in Major League Baseball. And I expect that only to grow and grow as this year and a few years continue.
Yeah, the Nats become the seventh team that's going to have local games produced and distributed by MLB. The other teams, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Cleveland Guardians, the Seattle Mariners, the San Diego Padres, the Colorado Rockies, and the Minnesota Twins. Before we go further, our guy, our pal, Mark Zuckerman. So he is still an employee of MASN. That will end at the end of this month. Mark on Wednesday afternoon put out a thread on X. You could follow Mark on X at Mark Zuckerman. You could follow me on X at Al Galdi. Some great stuff from Mark in this thread. I'll just read to you a little bit of it. Wanted to take a moment to say thanks to everyone who has reached out regarding today's announcement. It's so very much appreciated. I'll continue covering the Nationals for MASN until the end of the month, at which point my employment with the network ends, end quote. I will say what I said to Mark on X. Mark is excellent at what he does. He will continue to do well with however he does what he does next. There's not a doubt in my mind about that. We do expect Mark to continue covering the Nats in some form, and we hope like heck that he can continue to do this podcast. But yeah, this is a big deal for sure. And I know you feel the same way. We've had Mark here since the inception of the podcast. Mark called me in 2021 to tell me about the podcast, and he's terrific at what he does. I don't think anyone listening to this needs me to say that, but I want to make that clear. He's outstanding at what he does, and he's going to continue to be outstanding at covering the Nats.
A lot to unpack over time, but it's still his seat, even though I'm here today and we're taking it one at a time, and let's just all be adults about it, but well said, Al.
Well, we'll try to be adults. I can't promise anything here. So the history. So much of this is the history. The Nats and MASN, MASN and the Nats. The MASN dispute. MASN was created in 2005 to televise both Washington Nationals and Baltimore Orioles games off the relocation of the Montreal Expos in the 2004-2005 offseason to Washington, D.C., what had been deemed Orioles broadcast territory. They're starting in 2012 was the MASN dispute, the details of which we do not have to revisit now. But the MASN dispute, a lengthy saga having to do with the Nats, at least from their vantage point, not receiving fair market value in terms of money from MASN. The dispute, of course, went on and on and on. And then out of nowhere came to an end. And this is where I really want to start to do a deep dive on what's going on here. So take you back to March 3rd, 2025, the shocking announcement from the Nats and Does that the MASN dispute was over. The announcement included this, quote, "The Washington Nationals and Baltimore Orioles jointly announced the final resolution of all issues related to the MASN dispute. For the 2025 season, Washington Nationals games will continue to be televised locally, exclusively by the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network under a new one-year contract. After this term, the Nationals will be free to explore alternatives for their television rights for the 2026 season and beyond. As part of the settlement, all disputes related to past media rights between the Nationals, Orioles, and MASN have been resolved, and all litigation will be dismissed," end quote. Well, the Nats, in being, quote, "free to explore alternatives for their television rights for the 2026 season and beyond," end quote, now have settled with partnering with MLB. But what I wonder is this. Is the Nats partnering with MLB for production and distribution of local telecasts of games part of a quid pro quo with MLB? Because you think about that announcement last March 3rd. The announcement of the end of the MASN dispute came out of nowhere. This was not anticipated. You know, sometimes when you get a big announcement, there is reporting in the days leading up to the actual announcement suggesting that the announcement is, or at least could be, coming. There was no such reporting. The announcement came, like a giant, rock falling from the sky. The terms of the dispute being settled have never been revealed or reported. There, in fact, has been very little reporting on how the settlement of the MASN dispute happened, what constitutes the settlement, or anything along those lines. We got this announcement last March 3rd, and then that was it. The topic just disappeared. And you wonder, okay, did MLB compel this settlement? How did this settlement happen? And is it possible that MLB compelled the settlement maybe as part of allowing the group led by David Rubenstein to buy the O's? So that happened in March 2024. And you wonder, could it be that part of MLB compelling the settlement was a quid pro quo with the Nats of, okay, we'll end the MASN dispute, we'll get you out of this mess, but then when you have the freedom to explore local television opportunities, you need to come with us. You need to join our army, our crew, our group of teams with which we are partnering for distribution and production of local telecasts of games. You wonder if something like that is what has led us to this. We know that the MLB commissioner, Rob Manfred, has this dream of having every MLB team under the umbrella of MLB for production and distribution of local telecasts of games. I know this is a little conspiracy theory on my part to say all of this, but I think you have to wonder about all of this. How did the settlement of the MASN dispute happen? What constituted that settlement? And is what was announced on Wednesday morning tied to that settlement?
I'm with you, Al. Don't have any proof, but we're on the same wavelength there. Rob Manfred has made it very clear, no secret, that this is part of his grand plan, as you said, to get everyone under the same umbrella. He's pointed to the year 2028 as a goal for that. I don't see the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Cubs, the Yankees, and the Mets being part of that. Those are kind of the five I put in their own category. But I could see the other 25 being part of the umbrella in 2028. And I'm sure to Rob Manfred, the Nats were a key piece to that in a few regards. One, just get rid of the litigation that never ended with MASN, but also on paper, the Washington Nationals are a major market. Now, we could discuss whether the Nats are a major market baseball team, but for negotiations, Washington, D.C. market is a pretty big deal to have on your side. So I think he probably wanted the Nats to come to the MLB side, which is what led to the end of the litigation. Again, totally my guess. I don't have any inside info on this. And so I think that's where we're at. And it's it's just really, MASN's over, Al. I mean, we had a year to prepare for it. But again, it struck me as a surprise when it happened on December 31st when the contract ended, because it's just been such a big part of the team.
It has been tied to the team since the team came to D.C., no doubt. And, we, of course, knew that something like this could be happening, the Nats partnering with MLB. But I know you and I both also had talked about, well, maybe it actually is in the Nats' best interest to stay with MASN because there at least is a known there when it comes to the money you get. And it may not be the money that you want. That was the crux of the MASN dispute. But, there's no guarantee that the Nats partnering with MLB will result in more local television revenue as compared to the Nats being with MASN. And so that's another aspect of this that makes me think that this may be part of a quid pro quo. This would seem to be a financial risk on the part of the Nats, and maybe it works out in the Nats' favor, but, there's no guarantee here. Streaming right now, it very much is viewed as the present and the future, but there's a lot that is to be determined. And there is a lot that still is not known when it comes to generating revenue via streaming. And at least with MASN, for all of the problems, you were guaranteed, whatever that figure had come to be at this point, $60 million, $70 million, $80 million, etc. We had the launch of MASN Plus last year, right? Direct to consumer streaming. So there now was that as a part of all of this. So there is a risk here on the part of the Nats. And again, I come back to maybe this wasn't as much of a choice for the Nats as the situation had been depicted to be. We don't know, but I think it's more than fair to wonder about these things. There, to me, were two major problems for the Nats with MASN. Number one, the Nats, in being on MASN, completely missed out on the boom of mega money television deals for local broadcasts of games. This boom happened via the explosion of regional sports networks, RSNs. RSNs have completely collapsed for a variety of reasons. And the Nats as a team in a top 10 media market, that's what Washington, D.C. is, missed out on the boom. And, nobody has to set up a GoFundMe for the Lerner ownership group, but it is a shame that the ownership never truly benefited from that boom that was in effect, as recently as, 6-7 years ago, something like that. 10 years ago, you had teams swimming in money via local television contracts. You do not have that to that extent anymore. Number two, and this is where things get a little delicate, but we will be delicate. So MASN was run on the cheap, and everyone knows this, okay? And the problem with that, to me, was always this, as much as anything. MASN lacked the ancillary program that other RSNs have had. And the problem with MASN from a Nats perspective was never the people working for MASN. A lot of good people, a lot of talented people have worked for MASN. The problem to me with MASN from a Nats perspective in terms of the on-air content was the lack of on-air content. If you have watched MASN over the years, you know what has constituted MASN programming. Nats and Orioles games, Nats and Orioles pre- and post-game shows, random college football and college basketball games, ESPN News, and infomercials. Like, that basically has been your MASN diet for years. And there, to me, on MASN has been a big-time lack of Nats and also Orioles ancillary programming. Talk shows, feature shows that I think would have done a lot of good to grow each team's audience, to grow the fan base of each team. And I've brought this up before, but if you ever watch other RSNs, and I get that RSNs are dying, but there still are some that are alive and in some cases doing pretty well. You think about like Yes Network, Yankee Entertainment and Sports Network. If you ever watch Yes Network, there is a ton of Yankees programming. The game broadcasts are only part of what you get on Yes Network. And that kind of thing for the Nats on MASN was a pipe dream. And, we don't know what Nationals.TV is going to be. Maybe it is just games and pre- and post-game shows, but maybe it can be, or at least become something more. Maybe it can become almost like a Nationals television network where you get ancillary programming, you get talk shows, you get magazine-style shows that get people more invested in the Nats, get people more educated on the Nats. I really hope that kind of thing becomes a part of Nationals.TV.
All right, a few things here that you said. Let's start with the ownership part, the Lerners. It's not been a great decade for ownership with the Washington Nationals. A lot of people who listen aren't thrilled with them at the moment. But I do want to tip my cap, because as we're closing the MASN chapter here, to Ted Lerner last decade. Spent big money on pitching despite not being part of that boom that you mentioned, Al. The Patrick Corbin deal, even though it went south, but it was great the first year. Obviously, keeping Strasburg and the Max Scherzer deals. They could have skipped that. But Ted Lerner wanted to win a World Series before he passed away, and they spent money, and it worked out in 2019. So I just want to address that there. To the audience part, with the pre and post game, this could be streaming only. They've talked about maybe being on linear television. Work with me here. But you talk about pre and post game. Ever since television started, right? It was like, okay, pregame is a half hour basically, or something like that. Television works in half hour and hour increments. But in a world where we're not in linear TV, is pregame now 15 minutes? Is postgame now 15 minutes? Or is it longer? It also, pre and postgame is an easy way to fill commercials. So I don't know what direction we'll go there, but I don't think it's necessarily a given that the next version of pregame show will be about a half hour long. And then one other thing, I just kind of circle back to something you said, talking about reasons with MLB and the Nats and MASN and the litigation ending. One thing I want to throw out there is the next big cash cow that is expected in Major League Baseball is that they are going to up the rights fees for the games in Japan and South Korea. Those have been very undervalued over the years. Obviously, with Shohei Ohtani being the best player in the sport, times have changed a lot in Japan, for instance. And I could see Manfred saying to ownership, if you want to be part of this, our new Asia rights deal, you got to be part of the, MLB umbrella. Just throwing that out there, don't have proof there.
There is so much here that we don't know. There are so many directions in which this all could go. I never know how interesting this is to people who aren't in media, so bear with me on this. But, the changes in media are moving at like lightning speed. And, the basic premise with the changes, and I think, everyone understands this, traditional media is dying. Radio is dying. Television is dying. Newspapers are dying, magazines are dying, and things like podcasts and YouTube and streaming services and digital print media like Substack are surging. Now, there's still a lot to be determined with the new media, like how do you maximize revenue? How financially viable is all of that new media? But that is where things are going, and that is where things in a lot of ways already are. And you're seeing this in a variety of areas of life. Like, it's not just in sports, it's also in like political media, like traditional political media. What's called like legacy media is dying. Everyone knows that. New media is taking over in so many ways. So it's fascinating, at least, from our perspective, being in the business, to see this. Like I said, I don't know how interesting it is to someone who isn't in the business, but what is happening here with the Nats is a part of this, not going to another network, not going to say, Monumental Sports Network, not, forming your own network. That used to be the thinking that if the Nats ever got out of the MASN situation, the Nats could form their own MASN, their own RSN. And, once we got to 4, 5, 6 years ago, it became pretty clear that's not the direction you're going to go in because RSNs are fading away. And so, the Nats now end up joining MLB, and I hope this works for the Nats. But more importantly, I hope this works for the Nats fan. Now, again, this is not a streaming only deal, at least if you go by the press release from the Nats. The idea is to have Nationals.TV available via some cable and satellite providers. I think that's going to be interesting. How widespread is the availability of Nationals.TV on cable and satellite providers? I know for a lot of sports fans right now, it is frustrating because it feels like you have to have 1 million streaming subscriptions to be able to watch all of the things that you want to watch. And I get that. And, you wonder about that long term in terms of the viability of sports via streaming. Are people going to be willing to pay for, 4, 5, 6 different services to watch all of the games that people want to watch? Are people going to start making choices on things that they do and do not watch? I think if you're the Nats and you want to grow your fan base, you do want to have Nationals.TV on at least some cable and satellite providers, maybe even on over-the-air TV. But again, how widespread that's going to be, I think it's going to be interesting. But I do think that by now, most people are, more than capable of watching games via streaming and are comfortable watching games via streaming. I know there still are some people who will have a problem with it or have a hard time with it. And again, you still do wonder about how many people are going to be willing to pay more money here for their sports. But this is how a lot of things are available now. So this is not, the out of nowhere thing that I think it was for people as recently as even 2 or 3 years ago.
With you there. The ESPN app at the moment, and I'm sure the cost will keep going up, it's $130 for the year. Actually, if you think about it from a 12-month standpoint, I don't think that's too bad at all. If you think it from a 6-month standpoint, if you're only going to get it for baseball, that becomes a new cost. but it's not $500. It's not $1,000. Everyone spends their money differently. Obviously baseball has a high audience over 50 and over 60, which you would think would be less inclined to get off legacy media. But at a certain point, like the Oscars are going to YouTube, like the future's here. And this is where we're at.
Will be interesting to see if Nationals.tv is on YouTube TV. I know a lot of people, including our household, that has YouTube TV. By the way, the price of YouTube TV, for those who have it, this, it has gone up and up and up. And, that's, again, part of like, okay, where are we going with all of the streaming? And the costs do continue to increase. So, again, there are proper price points that are going to need to be found here.
Here's the set and the pitch. Strike three called on the outside corner. This game is over. A fastball at 89 miles an hour gets Chase Utley looking to end the ball game, and at 9:46 Eastern Time on April the 6th, 2005. There is the first victory in the history of the Washington Nationals, highlighted by Brad Wilkerson becoming the 26th player in Major League history to hit for the cycle twice in his young career.
In terms of the broadcast talent, so we know that the great Bob Carpenter has retired. There has been a big and looming question with Nationals telecasts beyond the 2025 season of who now is the number one play-by-play announcer for local telecasts of Nats games. We still don't know for sure. Nothing has been announced for sure. But there was reporting on Wednesday morning, Andrew Golden, Nats insider for the Washington Post, reporting the Nats are planning to hire Alexa Datt as the team's new sideline reporter, per sources. Datt was most recently part of the St. Louis Cardinals television coverage. Now, the Nats' previous sideline reporter for years had been Dan Kolko. Nothing is official, but, Tim, just reading the tea leaves on something like this, thinking about something like this logically, if the Nats are hiring a new sideline reporter, and there has been no reporting that Dan Kolko is out, there has been no announcement from Dan Kolko that he's out, you do wonder if Dan Kolko is, in fact, the new number one play-by-play announcer for local telecasts of Nats games. But that is something else with all of this, that there is a new play-by-play person for Nats games starting in 2026.
Dan Kolko is clearly the favorite in the clubhouse to be broadcasting the Nationals on opening day this year. But, Alexa Datt came from the Cardinals broadcast, so you don't know. There always could be an outside hire. Having worked in media my whole life, I've seen crazier things happen with hirings. I'm sure you've obviously seen that as well. But definitely, if you had to put odds on it, clearly Kolko is the favorite.
The Orioles are staying on MASN, at least for now. That is the reporting. Also, the reporting is that MASN 2 is going bye-bye. We, for years, grew accustomed to that. MASN and MASN 2. Are the Nats tonight on MASN or MASN 2? Well, A, you don't have to worry about that anymore. But B, MASN 2 is gone. Matt Wyrick, Orioles insider for the Baltimore Sun, he early Wednesday afternoon reported the Orioles will be removing MASN 2 from channel guides and moving forward with just the main network channel, according to a MASN spokesperson. With baseball, TV matters more than with any other sport because you have so many more games, right? And, in the case of the NFL, there's no such thing, unless you're talking about preseason games, as a local television contract, right? All of the NFL games are televised via national television contracts. Now, in the NBA and NHL, you do have local television contracts, but you have far fewer games. Baseball is different. Baseball is special. And how you watch games, how available games are to you, who the announcers are, that stuff matters so much. So this is a big deal with what the Nats are doing. We will see how good the production values are. It sounds like, at least when you read the press release and when you look at how MLB has done other games so far, I do think there's a chance here for the production value of the local broadcast of Nats games to be heightened considerably. We'll see. I'm not going to just assume anything, but I think there's a chance here for the viewing experience for the Nats fan to be much better in 2026 as compared to in the past. But again, we'll see. There's a lot to be determined. And again, we still have to see how many people are willing to subscribe to this, how many people have access to this. It's not an ideal time from a Nats perspective to be launching launching Nationals.tv when you're in the midst of a rebuild that refuses to end. It'd be interesting to see what the numbers would be if, this was 2014 or 2016 or 2017 or 2019 and the Nats were a perennial postseason contender. How much more would we be talking about in terms of people subscribing to Nationals.tv, watching Nationals.tv? Of course, we won't know, but if you are a loyal Nats fan, this clearly is something you got to try to get access to, because otherwise it's going to be hard to watch Nats games.
I'll be very disappointed if the production value is not good on Nationals TV. And I don't think the bar is that high. I'm not asking it for it to be NBC Sunday Night Football, but there's clearly room for improvement. And to start out the gate cheap would really, really, really be tough to swallow if you are a diehard fan and you want to watch this team play 150 plus times a year. Al, I want to throw one thing at you. My first thought, though, with all of this, once it came out that the Nats were going in this direction, can't say for certain, but I think this ends the chances of Ted Leonsis becoming the next owner of the Washington Nationals, because Monumental doesn't seem to be in baseball's plans. And would he want to own the team if the games are not on Monumental? I doubt it.
It's a great question. I was thinking about that earlier today. Like, does this have anything to do with the situation with Nats ownership, or is this independent of Nats ownership? And I mean, there's still, with this Nats ownership scenario, are just things we don't know. Like, how willing truly is the Lerner ownership group to sell the team? I still think if the right offer came along, the Nats would be sold tomorrow. But it doesn't seem like the right offer is coming along, whatever that right offer in the minds of the Lerner ownership group happens to be. But yeah, I mean, to your point, it wouldn't seem like this increases the likelihood of Ted Leonsis buying the Nats for sure. I mean, if you're Ted, what you've always wanted is to buy the Nats, to put the Nats on Monumental Sports Network. Unless there's an out for the Nats from this arrangement, that's something we don't know. How, contractually speaking, are we talking this is a 1-year arrangement and we'll see? Was a 5-year deal just signed? Was a 15-year deal just signed? We don't know. But going back to my conspiracy theory of earlier in the show, if in fact this is the function of a quid pro quo, then it would seem that the Nats will not be leaving the arms of MLB in terms of local broadcasts of games anytime soon.
I just don't think Manfred would accept that. And I think Leonsis, as we know, has been part of the bidding process, but it seems like Manfred got his way here. And with your point of, if they got the right offer, the team would be sold tomorrow. I agree with you. Once this gets going and Nationals.tv exists and is a thing and dollar signs are attached to it, that's just something to keep in mind as it relates to ownership.
Well, and if you're going to buy the Nats, you do want to know, well, what kind of revenue am I generating in terms of local broadcasts? And right now, that's an unknown. So even if you are interested in buying the Nats and you're willing to meet the Lerner ownership group's ask for the Nats, wouldn't you now want to wait at least a season to see what exactly the financials are when it comes to local TV, right? When you buy something as big as a pro sports franchise, a big part of that is figuring out what the revenue streams are and how lucrative those revenue streams are. And this now is an unknown. Now, there are all kinds of possibilities with that. Like, has MLB guaranteed the Nats, say, listen, at minimum, you will get, and I'm just making up a number here, at minimum, you'll get $50 million this year for your local television. There's a floor here, so you can be assured that you'll at least have that. And maybe the minimum's a lot higher than that. I don't know. I'm just, again, throwing out a number. But, you do wonder about the particulars of this arrangement. Or is this just the Nats, flying blind? Is this, Thelma and Louise driving off the cliff? The Nats and Rob Manfred driving off the cliff and just, entrusting destiny with their fates. We'll see, I guess.
Nice movie reference there. I will also say that, now this is 4 years ago, but now that MASN's settled, and we've talked about this before, I just don't understand why the team was put up for sale before the litigation ended. It didn't make sense. Who would have bought the team? That would jump into that? That thought popped back into my head today. But again, I'm talking about old news here.
Well, I think there's still a lot with that is kind of hard to figure out. I still don't think everyone in the Lerner ownership group is on the same page when it came to that. And it may still be that everyone is not on the same page. We don't know. But we do know that the Nats are done with MASN. Major news here. We certainly want to hear from you, your thoughts on this, your reactions to this, your analysis of this. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website you can check out too, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. We always appreciate nice reviews and 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Those things help us out a lot. So thank you very much for doing them. And we will continue to come to you with episodes of this podcast as news warrants throughout this Nats offseason. Not a lot to discuss in terms of player movement. There is now a general manager with the Nats, Ani Kalambi. We have that to get into at some point here soon. But an emergency installment of this podcast, Tim. Good to have you with us here. And we'll see what else may pop up here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and believe it or not, pitchers and catchers are not that far away. Baseball calendar sneaks up on you quick once we get into January.
Yeah, the offseason moves quickly for sure, even when your team isn't necessarily doing a whole lot in terms of player transactions. For Tim Shovers, I'm Al Galdi. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
3-2 pitch to Vinny, drilled to left field, way back, Berkman looking up, it is gone, goodbye! And the Nationals have hit their 4th home run of the game. They've all been solo home runs. For Vinny, his 8th of the year, his 2nd RBI of the game, and 50th of the season. And the Nationals add to their lead.
Some things in life are just made for each other. Peanut butter and jelly, macaroni and cheese, Modelo and college football. College football season is Modelo season, and the season has officially kicked off. The Modelo Recruiter is back in action, looking to reward full-time fans who give their all for their team and their school week in and week out. If you're listening to this, you've been recruited. So lace them up and get out there. And don't forget to make time for a well-deserved ice-cold reward. Because college football wouldn't be the same without you. So grab yourself a Modelo and enjoy, the official beer sponsor of the College Football Playoff, Modelo.